Well, we've got a special treat today. Randy Bernard, who Randy and I have known each other 20 plus years, maybe 25 years, all the way back to his days as the CEO at the Pro Bull Riders Tour, PBR for short. Randy's done a number of things. He's one of the more savvy, what I will call promoter types, not necessarily that he is a promoter, but he understands the game. He's been a CEO of a rights owner and a rights holder in PBR. He went on to become the CEO of IndyCar for 3+ years. And in all of that, he brought innovation, creativity, and a sort of a knack to bring commercial partners in that didn't disrupt the content that was either on the dirt in the case of PBR or on the track in the case of IndyCar, but really sort of a 365-degree, if you'll permit me, sort of a renaissance man in sport, music, and entertainment. So today, and for the past, 12, 14 years, he's been the manager for Garth Brooks. No small feat. So we're going to hear a lot about that and a lot about how he got to where he is. So Randy, thank you so much for joining the podcast. Welcome to The Best Boss Ever.
Wow, it's great to be on here and see you again.
When you and I first met, you were running PBR, and you had elevated that entity significantly from a few stops to multiple stops across the country, from a smattering of cable television all the way to broadcast television. I mean, you had it all working ranging in venues from the logical ones, be it, Bakersfield or Fort Worth, Texas, to Madison Square Garden. So let me start with this question. We start every episode with this question. Nobody gets to where we collectively are by ourselves. We have leaders, mentors, bosses, coaches, parents, any or all of the above. So for you, who was the best boss, leader, mentor you've had, and what did you take away from that individual that stays with you today?
Great question. I've had so many great mentors in my life. Going back to my dad and my grandpa, I think everyone in my life has given me a little bit. My grandpa, hardest worker I ever knew, he was always about work hard. The luck will come to you if you work your butt off. My dad was a lot more about logic, really think things out. And then throughout my career, I've had some amazing people like Johnny Morris, who owns Bass Pro Shops, and Tom Teague. Tom Teague was the one that when we were broke, PBR, we need money. And I called him and I said, I need 3.2 million by Monday. And he said, it'll be in your bank account by 5 p.m. Monday. And I've had some absolutely amazing mentors throughout my life. A great friend of mine, he was a 4-star general in the Air Force, General Bill Looney. I mean, I feel like he taught me more about how you make sure you put the best people in place and get out of their way. I was a micromanager to a fault. And the quicker I moved out of their way, I found the better the results we started getting. I've been so blessed with so many great mentors along the way and bosses. You know, you sleep with dogs, you're going to get fleas. You hang out with bad people, you become a bad person. You hang out with great people, and you've got a heck of a lot better chance to become a great person. And I've really been blessed to be able to surround myself with amazing people. And that's, when I was a kid, I used to say that people would ask you what your hobby is, and I said my hobby is collecting friends. And so throughout my life, I've had many many great friends, and I'm proud of that.
Well, listen, you've always been an affable guy. I've known you, as I mentioned at the top, a number of years, and always gracious, great sense of humor, not belying the fact that you're a razor sharp business guy. So PBR, for the uninitiated here, and I mean, there's going to be some that don't really understand what the PBR is today or was when you were running it. Give us a quick snapshot of not only what it is, but the methodologies that you used to grow audiences, to grow the number of venues, to bring in additional sponsors, to really turn that property into where it is today. It's probably got a valuation of north of $200 million. Don't really know that, but I know it traded a couple of times for 9 figures. So over to you. PBR, rules of the road, or dirt, as it were.
Well, to really step into the PBR, you have to go back to it was truly a step in the Wild West. When they started There was 18 cowboys that put up $1,000 each. 3 of them were broke, had to borrow the $1,000. They didn't even have the money, and they're all bull riders. And my board was made up of 7 bull riders. And in those early years, it wasn't about logic or who had the best ideas. It was whoever was willing to fight the most and the hardest and scream the loudest was going to really try to get their way. And those board meetings were interesting. We had some just actual fist fights, tables flying, chairs flying, not tables, chairs flying, in a board meeting. It was wild. You know, we started with $20,000, and we never borrowed a dime up until we were able to, when we tried to buy our television rights, and that's when Tom Teague helped me with that. You know, so we start with $20,000. We had 8 events, and we had C markets, the ones that you mentioned: Bakersfield, the Midland, Odessa, Paso Robles, California, Fort Worth. And our goal from day one was, back then a world champion cowboy could make about $100,000. Our goal was we wanted to see one cowboy earn $1 million in 1 year. And I think it took us, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years to make it happen. But we started with those 8 events, and we worked it up to 225 events. We had offices in Australia, Brazil, Canada, Mexico, United States, and we had a television office in England with IMG at the time. And we just started taking off, and it started blowing up. And the only problem we had, the biggest problem we had, was we didn't own the television rights. We'd given them away back in the beginning just to get on TNN. Our ratings started taking off. They put us behind NASCAR, and all of a sudden we were doing 2.0 ratings, which was unbelievable for TNN. And so at that point, I know I needed to buy my television rights back. I went to Alan Reed, and Barry Frank was the one that bought them, got 'em, from IMG. He went to him and said, "Look, if you don't sell us the rights back, we're going to put the cameras up in the worst seats in the entire arenas, and there will be no more interviews. So we need you to play ball with us." And he did. And so he asked for $6.5 million, which I couldn't find the money. A bank gave us 3 million, and then Tom Teague came in with the rest of it.
Got it.
and, uh, and that was the best decision we ever made. And that's when we went to Tommy Roy, actually, John Miller at NBC, and we were able to get our first NBC network deal.
Right. Well, John Miller and Tommy Roy, David Michaels. I don't know that you ever worked with David, but he was a longtime producer at NBC Sports as well. So you say buy the rights back, and generally speaking, you and I know what that means. But I would guess that largely our audience really doesn't understand what that means. So let's talk about media rights for a second. So Barry Frank, legendary IMG, commits to you, the PBR, either sells or conveys the rights to TWI, which is the owned and operated group at IMG, London based. And TWI produces and distributes your programming, and they have the rights to do that for however long. Was that a conveyance deal? Was that they paid you for the rights deal? Was that a rev share deal? How did that work? And what ultimately led you to decide you had to get those rights back?
Well, it was actually Alan Reed that owned the rights, and he was a producer of TNN. And I think David Hall was the CEO of TNN at the time. And David said, "Alan, you help these guys." And Alan was smart and said, "I'll help you if you give me the rights." So that's basically how it happened. But when you buy the rights, you're buying a bunch of content, but there's no guarantee there's going to be anything that's ever going to make it. And so you really, Tom Teague really, when he gave us the $3.5 million, he really put, it was a big step, because there was, as I told him, there's nothing but content that you're buying here. I mean, I don't know what it's going to be worth. I mean, bull riding was not a big thing back then. And actually, I think the valuation is about 600 million today
Oh,
on
wow.
the
Well,
PBR.
so I'm,
So, so
70% off.
that's all right. Hey, look, 200, 600 is all, it's still good money. But yeah, so the interesting part of when we bought it was, um, he didn't want to sell, and we went to him, and he was like, "I don't want to be on NBC. We're going to stay on TNN." And I think TNN had him in their back pocket. So we were not getting we had a terrible deal. We weren't making any money on our television. They would put us, if they wanted to do a 6 week delay, they'd give us a 6 week delay. And I knew we had to get ownership. I knew we had to go to NBC. I wanted to make sure all television was live. It was a terrible deal. I think he was more interested in getting to the sushi restaurant after the bull riding than he was in producing the show. So I think, and he just did not care, unfortunately. But I do think that when we bought it back, that's when things started happening. Well, the first thing that happened was we bought it back right before September of 2001. Our first NBC, well, let me back up one step further. So John Miller had told me, no, I'll never put bull riding on television.
Always his first response.
He wasn't even nice about it. He was very rude, to be completely honest. And so then my buddy, who gave me the Tom Teague, says, "Hey, my partner in New York, Ken Langon's on the board of GE, and at the time GE owned NBC." So he goes, "Let's go to dinner with him and see if he can help us." So we go to dinner with Ken Langon in New York, and Ken goes, "How can I help you?" And I walk through this presentation with him. I show him bull riding, and he go, and this is at dinner after. He goes, "What do you want me to do?" I go, "Well, we really want to be on NBC." So he picks up the phone and goes, "Bobby, who loves you?" And I'm like, "Who the heck's Bobby?" And so he goes, "I need the professional bullfighters on TV." And I'm like, "Bull riders, kid." And he goes, "Yeah, this is American." So he goes, "Thank you. All right, I'll send you something tomorrow morning." I have no clue who Bobby is. Next morning, my phone rings. It's John Miller again. John goes, "Hey, how would you like to be on NBC?" He goes, "Bob Bright just called me and said he wants to give you guys a shot." So John Miller's going to get the last shot here, though, because, at the time, you could buy TV for about 225,000 an hour. John Miller said, "You're going to pay 350,000 an hour," and I wasn't going to let Ken Lane Gone down. I wasn't going to let Tom down or the PBR. So we bought it. We bought 2 hours for 700,000, and then another $200,000 for, no, actually 250 for production. So we we were already a million into this baby before we even had a show on NBC.
And in that specific moment, did John sell you all of the inventory, or did the network hold back some percentage of the inventory? I'm talking about advertising inventory now, because you have sponsors. You could,
Oh
in
yeah.
theory, sell incremental, right? Add spots to your sponsors and at least attempt to make 700 grand back or a million back.
Oh, I mean, yeah, he held. I don't know how many he held back, but he had quite a few he held. So I mean, I think he probably held on a 2 hours. He probably had 20 spots he held for himself.
Got it.
And so, but I didn't like. I just want. I'm like, I called him back the next day and said, "John, I don't mind paying this, but you got to give me, if we do a 2.0 rating on that, you'll give me at least 4 shows next time." And he goes, "Randy, you're not going to do a 2.0 on our network. So don't even think about it. I'm going to put you on the same day. It's the Friday of Thanksgiving weekend. I think the Skins was going on. There was figure skating and NFL. So he gave me a terrible day. It was a Sunday. It was a Sunday of Thanksgiving. That's what it was. And it was terrible. And I'm like, but I'm like, "Look, if we do a 2, you give me more shows." He goes, "You're not going to do a 2," and that's pretty much he hung up. But I said, he goes, "But I'll tell you what, if you do a good rating, I'll give you another show next year." Very good. So that's when I took the chance. I said, "We have to do this." And then I sold a ton of sponsorships to it. I sold one to a reservation down in New Mexico for like 650, 700,000. So I felt really good. And then September 11th happened, and they pulled the entire sponsorship. When you do a deal with a reservation, they have their own laws, so you have to go to their tribal council.
Right.
So there was no way I was going to win that one, and we had a signed contract. It didn't make a difference. They said no. We probably lost probably $1 million on that first event, and we didn't have $1 million. So I mean, it was stressful during then. But the saving grace was that Monday morning after our NBC event, John calls me and goes, "Hey, I'm a little surprised. Congratulations, you did a 2.4."
Nice.
And he was blown away. He goes, "Yeah, I think we could do it maybe 8 shows next year." And then I got my 250, 225,000 an hour. So we become really good friends, and he was absolutely amazing to us.
That's awesome.
And Tommy Roy, you can't get a better producer than Tommy Roy. And we had John Gonzalez directing, who between the two of them, they had over 30 sports Emmys. And I mean, absolutely had the dream team on NBC. And Dick Ebersol was absolutely amazing to me. I mean, he was the nicest, most kind, and just always wanting to help us.
Right. They were a great crew then. I had the good fortune to do two different things with that group at NBC. The AVP, which was the Pro Beach Volleyball
Yeah.
Tour in the run up to Atlanta. Of course, NBC's the Olympic broadcaster. They knew that AVP volleyball was a rising star in the world of niche sports, and they were going to program it in Atlanta. We started with 5 hours in 93, 12 hours in 94, and 22 and a half hours in 95, a lot of which was live in 95. The interesting thing in that scenario was, I don't know how much anybody in this audience knows about volleyball, but historically, volleyball used side out scoring, which was you could only score when you were serving the ball, right? If you were defending and not serving and you won the point, it didn't count as a point. You just got the chance to serve and get more points. So typically you had to win by 2. So these matches could go on for a long time, and we invariably ran into the top of the hour and they were cut off, right? So David Michaels, a close colleague of John Gonzalez and Tommy Roy, was our producer and director. And he and I got in a room and we said, we got to figure this out. So we went to rally scoring, which is every time you win a point, you actually get a point, and you didn't have to win by 2. You could win by 1.
Wow, those are great rules
Yeah,
changes.
we took that to not different than the PBR with 8 cowboys spending $1,000 a piece. The board was all players, and it was a player-owned and controlled league. And they,
I bet you didn't have the good fights that we did.
we didn't throw any chairs, but we traded some pretty serious words. And I was up there, and I had David, fortunately, with me, and I said, listen, guys, you have an opportunity to go on this network in a live environment, which will do wonders for this league, this sport, especially in the run up to Atlanta in 2 years. Here's what's not working. Side out scoring is not working. It just doesn't work. And grumble, 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 bitch, moan, the whole kit, right? And finally, I said, David, speak some wisdom here. And he said, well, guys, you have 2 choices. You can keep doing side out scoring and lose NBC, or you can do rally scoring and we can turn this into a home run. Literally his words. Players looked at each other, said, yeah, okay, we'll do that. And that was John Miller, and that was David Michaels. And it was classic. And then the other thing was, before that, the NFL Quarterback Challenge, which John Gonzalez directed. And we ran on NBC for 4 years with that property. So a lot of stories with the NBC brass. Very cool guys.
Amazing, amazing humans. I'm still very close. I see Tommy all the time, or talk to Tommy at least a couple times a year, not all the time, but and he's doing golf now.
Right.
I loved that team. They were absolutely amazing.
Yeah. And they were creative and innovative and willing to take some risk, even though they got their pound of flesh from you at 350 grand an
God,
hour.
did they ever? 100%.
Right. So fast forward, you put you've got a great story going. You got lots of TV coverage, lots of sponsorship. You're in A, B, and C markets. So you decide to put the property on the block for sale. What led to that? Why did you all decide to do that?
Well, if I could take one step back, like when we were moving into A markets was really hard because nobody understood. Like moving to Madison Square Garden was almost impossible. So the first thing I needed to do was educate and sell sponsorships. I mean, sponsorships, nobody wanted to give us money back then. Anheuser-Busch was the very first, Bud Light, and then Jack Daniels. And Bud Light gave us amazing credibility because it was the Bud Light Cup, and we started, Tony Ponturo and his whole team was absolutely fantastic. But, our first thing that we had to do was go prove that we could we could draw huge crowds in big cities. And when we went to
Yeah,
Madison
sell
Square
tickets, not
Garden,
just put
yeah,
it on TV, but sell tickets.
no, yeah, I needed a crowd to be seen in that in those stadium arenas. And so when we went to Madison Square Garden, we were the first week in January. It was always the playoff week, wild card week, and every year it was inevitable that one of the New York teams was going to be a wild card, and we were going to go straight up against them every single year. The first year, I took my marketing team to New York to MSG, and I walked them down Broadway Street, and I took them back to my hotel, and I had a big conference table, and I shut the windows and I said, "Name me 5 sponsors, each one of you. Write 5 sponsors down that you just saw on Broadway in New York." It's so cluttered. My point was, it's so cluttered, you don't see hardly anything, right? And I'm like, how are we going to separate ourselves? How are we going to break out and become a professional sport, especially in this city? And we had to get very creative everywhere we went. Like in that city, I did something kind of illegal. I went and hired street teams to go out at 2 in the morning and put bullheads on all the manhole covers. And you know where the steam comes out, those 2 holes?
Oh yeah.
I made that the bull nose. So and it said, "Follow me to Madison Square Garden," to all these bullheads all over the city. I ended up getting fined pretty good money on it. I didn't think, I wasn't going to be in jail or anything. It was just a fine. But I'd have paid that tenfold because it was absolutely, it was before viral moments. You didn't have social media like you have today. And then we went and we took 9 taxi cabs, painted them up like, made them look like bulls. Huge bullheads on the front of them, folded them up with fake cowhide. And we told New York, if you whistle one of these down, you get a free ride anywhere in the city. You just thought I gave New York millions of dollars. I mean, everywhere we went, they were like, thank you for the." They were thanking all the Cowboys, and I mean, it was just a really fun. We did that at the time. The mayor was really Rudy Giuliani, and he made it PBR week, and we sold PBR out the first year, and that is when everything really changed for the PBR because we were able to bring so much corporate America to I mean, we had a lot riding on that big event because if it had not been successful, I don't know if we'd have signed as much. We saw, probably $25 million in sponsorships, between that and in our deal at NBC. That's when it started. It started printing money. We just started making money. Like we were doing very, very well. And that's really what really helped break the PBR, in my opinion.
Got it. So you put it on the block, right?
So we put it on the
2007,
block.
2006, 2007, 2008, in that time frame. I
Yep.
know because you and I were, on opposite sides of the table back then.
Yeah.
But you sell it to Spire Capital. It lives there for a while. You move on. Spire then, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years later, whatever it was, sells it to IMG, and it's now tucked into TKO alongside UFC, PBR, and whatever other events Shapiro's overseeing there. So it's a really good story. But so you successfully exit PBR, and then you show up as the CEO of IndyCar.
That is a crazy one. Carl, when I say I didn't know anything about race cars, I didn't know a NASCAR from a Formula One car to an Indy car.
Right.
And I had a 4-year commitment with Spire, but I had a fourth year. It was an option. I had a 3-year mandate, and I'm like, guys, I've got all my eggs are in the same basket. I need to do something different and move on. And they were like, "You're never going to move on." And I said, "Yeah, I'm thinking about it." Next day, IndyCar calls me, and the family wanted to meet with me. I flew in and met with them before going to. I was on my way to Madison Square Garden. I flew in, had a 2-hour meeting with Jack Snyder, the trustee. He said, "We want to hire you as a consultant, and we want you to do what you did with PBR. We want to you to do the same thing with IndyCar, because IndyCar before 1994 was bigger than NASCAR, and then when the split
Yeah.
happened,
Right.
it just devoured it. I mean,
Cart and
NASCAR
IndyCar
devoured it.
do this, and now, right, nobody
Yeah.
knows who to go watch or do or whatever. And NASCAR, to their credit, filled that void in a massive way.
100%. I think the best thing that NASCAR did was they went after the American drivers, and that's what made IndyCar. I mean, all these small tracks across America, it was those great Americans that were coming up that people wanted to see. The AJ Foyts, the even Mario Andretti, like all those big guys were huge, and they followed him and they loved him. And IndyCar was doing 375,000 people at Indy 500, and even on qualifying week they were getting 200,000 people to come to qualifiers. It was amazing, and so I looked at this. I had read a lot of articles. I'd read where they had lost $30 million a year for 15 years straight. And I just felt like at the time that it was IRL is what they branded it. And I just thought if I'd love to do this. So when I met with Jack, he called me back and goes, I don't want you as a consultant. The family wants you as our CEO. I looked at their financials. I wanted to make sure I can make a difference. I called him back a week later and said I'd love to accept the job. And so I opted out of my fourth year at PBR. Went over, and my first I had so many important things I wanted to do at IndyCar, and I needed to do them right away. The first one was stop the bleeding. I wanted to take it. My goal was to get it to 15 million in that first year. And I was able to get it to about $7.2 million loss in the first year. My second big goal was I hated the name. IRL sounded almost like an acronym from IRA, or it was just I hated it. And so I'm like, this is IndyCar. It's Indy 500. So I went in, I rebranded it IndyCar. And then the third thing was I knew we needed a new car. The car was 8 years old. It was a V8. There was nothing fancy about it. It was, and I'm like, we had one car manufacturer and Honda, and we were thankful to have them. But I wanted more engine manufacturers, OEMs. I wanted to really change the sport and get it back to where it was in the early 90s and the 60s, 70s. It was unbelievable. And so those three goals were my priorities, and we went after it hard. And Roger Penske told me, he goes, Randy, you don't know anything about this business. By you creating a car is just the dumbest idea in the world. And he was right. And he made me change my position. First thing I did was I went out and brought on a consulting team of 7 people. I brought a Jill DeFerrin, who was an IndyCar, NASCAR, F1, and he owned a team. So I brought him on. I brought a Tony Purnell, who had created Pi Research, that was a professor in Cambridge in England, and so I flew over there, got him to come on. So I went and got the very, very best people in the world to help me develop a car, and it was absolutely the most fascinating thing I've ever done in my life, because you can just imagine, just like almost like your liberal and your conservative, your far left and your far right. You had that in the car, the Indy car. So you had your far left wanted a car that basically they'd had for the last 10 years. And on your far right, they wanted something more like the Jetsons.
Right.
So trying to bring everybody together, and that's where I brought that four-star general Bill Looney in as my moderator, because I knew he had just been tasked. One of his last tasks was to modernize the aircraft of the United States Air Force. So I had read something on this, so I called him, went and met with him, and he was the absolute person for the job that could moderate all these people, bring them together, and we created that car that is still running. It's probably in its 10, the DW12. So it was, yeah, 12. So it's been running for 13, 14 years now. They made some modifications to it, but it had speed, it had safety. I mean, it's an unbelievable car, and so that was very important to me. And we were able to bring a GM on as well. Mark Royce was unbelievable to us. Thank God he came in, and that made it helped us really start the sport go in the right direction. And I loved it. I didn't never tried to pretend to know. I always had great people around me that knew the sport, because I knew that my job there was to get it back into a marketing and branding and get it working again, and successful again. So it was un it was my probably one of the most hard, unbelievable jobs I've ever had in my life. It was a 5 a.m. 11 p.m. every night. It was the hardest I've ever worked, because I didn't know it. I had to learn, and I wanted to learn. But it was also I felt like I did everything I set myself my goals up to. I had some very big hardships. We lost Dan Weldon. The owners wanted to fight me on everything. They had a car they wanted to try to bring on, the Jetson car. It was the Delta Wing, and it was the biggest piece of shit you ever seen. Chip Ganassi was pushing me for that, and I'm like, we don't have any. It hadn't been built yet, and they've tried to race it, and it did nothing. It was a waste of time, and I'm thankful that our committee steered away from that and didn't use that, and they went and created the DW 12, the Delara, and so it was an unbelievable experience for me.
Well, that's great because you were, let's be real, didn't know anything, the unconventional
No.
candidate, but you had the X factor. And we talked about it at the top of the show, the creativity, the innovation, the willingness to say what if, to coin a phrase, and you did it, and that's credit to you, man. I mean, that's a great story. So I want to pivot now cuz, the racing world, whether it's Drive to Survive or IndyCar or even NASCAR, has really elevated itself since you were at the helm of IndyCar, and those formats all speak for themselves. But the more important thing to me is the creativity, the innovation, and the history and experience that you brought to the live music business. And you transitioned out of IndyCar into your own management company, took a risk again, entrepreneurial in nature. So I mentioned earlier on that you are the manager for Garth Brooks. So how did you and Garth get to meet? How did that all come to fruition? How long have you been doing it? Highs and lows. What have you learned? What's great about the music industry, and where do we go from here?
I had one extra stop in there before I got to Garth, the American rodeos. When I left, Jerry Jones had always wanted a big rodeo, and I never could do it when I was at PBR, and I couldn't do it when I was at IndyCar. And then when I left, I'm like, you know what? I can do that. So I went met with Jerry and Patrick Gotch, and I said, he goes, I want a huge rodeo. So I said, I have the format. I said, let's do a 1 day rodeo and pay out 2 million. Houston Rodeo pays out 1.7 million in 21 days. We're going to pay out 2 million in 1 day. And he loved it. And so I created this rodeo. It was unbelievable. And we did that for several years. And then Garth calls me and said,
Wait, did you
he
do it
said,
on the floor of AT&T Stadium?
oh yeah, I was at AT&T, of course, of course. I mean, this a 1 day production cost with the prize money. I think it was 5.6 million. So I had to sell. I sold $3 million in sponsor. The first year we still lost about $1 million, but we had 4 inches. It was 70 degrees on Saturday. Our event was on a Sunday. We had 4 inches of ice on that Sunday. We had everything that could have gone wrong, but the event was produced unbelievably, and we had dreams come true. Someone won $1 million out of it. It was a lot of fun to do, but after that, well, during that, I was out at the PBR finals. Garth calls me and says, "Would you come over?" His residency was at the Win at the time. He said, "Would you like to come over and sit down and we can watch some football?" And it was during the PBR World Finals. So I said, "Yeah, sure." So I did, and I went over there. And he asked me after we got done. He walked me to the elevator. He goes, "I'm probably going to go back out on tour next year, and I'd like you to come on as my manager." As a co-manager, right? He goes, I've got Bob Doyle, who's been with me from day one. And I'm like, Garth, I said, I'm not your guy. I said, I don't know anything about music. I said, it's one thing. I took PBR from nothing and made it into something. And I took IndyCar that was almost destroyed. And I've been able to do things like that. But you were on top of the world. I don't know what I can do for you. And so I declined. I'm like, I can't do anything. I'm going to pass. But I'm so honored that you asked me. So he called me back 6 months later and he said, hey, look, he texted me. He goes, the plane's at the airport. No, I was in Omaha that night. He goes, the plane's at the airport. Go get on it. I'll have you home by midnight. We'll have dinner. So I went, got on the plane, had dinner with him, and he's living in Tulsa at the time. And 2 days later, I'm still in my same clothes and still at his house and going to work for him. And it's the greatest decision I've ever made in my life. I just think the absolute world of Garth. He's just an amazing human being.
Well, I mean, legendary is not even come close to describing the man and the sort of body of work and the energy that he brings to every live show that he ever goes on stage to to perform at. You again, you jump in with both feet into the deep end of the pool. Now it's Garth Brooks.
Now
It was
it's
Jerry
scary.
Jones before that, but now you got the front man who's, has somehow figured out how to get you in the fold. So how quick was the learning curve? What did you change, if anything, in the whole sort of touring scope, scale, protocols? I mean, what did you bring to the party that he otherwise couldn't have gotten from the Bob Doyles?
Well, I mean, Bob is a legend in his own rights. Bob mortgaged his house to start Garth, and I absolutely loved Bob. There's not a greater human being on this. You know, good people are around good people, and those two guys, Bob and Garth, were amazing. So when the first day I was worried when Garth said, "Hey, Bob, Randy's going to come over and co-manage with you," and Bob couldn't have been nicer. I mean, he was just big, hug and like, I'm so excited to have you, and I look forward to this. And here's the plunger, go clean the toilet out. I mean, no, but Bob was like, he just was so nice to me. And so when you do something for Garth, I like to use this analogy, and I think it's probably the best analogy I could ever give on this. If I go find the smartest marketing person in the world, and I put him with an NFL team that is 0-16, I can make him look pretty stupid because he's not 99% of it's not Green Bay. He's not going to sell that many tickets. He's not going to have sold out crowd. I can take the Super Bowl champion team and I could put a monkey in the head of marketing, and I can make that monkey look like the smartest marketing person in the world. Well, guess what? I'm the monkey because I got Garth Brooks. Garth Brooks, like you just tell people Garth Brooks coming to the market and it sells out. And I think the first year when first shows was going to be in Chicago on that first tour back since he had retired 13 years, and he didn't know what he was going to be able to do. And so I'm at his house and he was still living in Oklahoma. And I said, Garth, I said, what do you anticipate having in the queue today? You look at if the average ticket buy is going to be 3.5 or 4. So he's like, yeah, if I could have 40,000 people in the queue, we could have a great tour. And so at 10 a.m. that morning, Garth and I are sitting there and with Ticketmaster, and our whole team is on the phone. And Garth goes, "Can I get a queue count, please?" At we at 10 o'clock sharp, we go on. So this is probably at 10:03. He asked for his queue count, and he's like, "Garth, we have 40,000 people in the queue, and the first two shows are almost clean." And he's like, "Okay, great. Let's hold. Let's not do anything yet. Let's hold." At like 10:15, he goes, "Can I get another queue count, please?" And they go, "Garth, you're at 170,000 people in the queue." Garth, at that minute, he just started welling up, and he gets up and he walks away from the table, and he's got his hands behind his head like this, and he's very emotional for him. And at 10:15 or 10:17, we asked for another queue count. He had 400,000 people in the queue for Chicago alone. And we sold, I think it was 12, 13, 14 shows out. And it was unbelievable. And that's all the shows he could have done. I mean, he could have done more, but he had more, but we didn't have any more dates held. That's all.
Right.
That's all. So I mean, we were stuck. That was so it was and it was fascinating to see his team that he had in place. And Garth, it's like he's the conductor. Like Garth is very smart. He is right there making all the decisions with you. That's the difference of being a CEO of PBR or IndyCar. Like you make a decision and like you don't sleep at night thinking, "Oh my God, if this doesn't work, how many people do you have to lay off or what,
Yeah, right.
like how many mouths you feed already, so it's very just stressed out all the time. With Garth, he's making the decisions with you. Like when you make the decision, it's not just you, it's him. He's very, very hands on, which it was the hardest, probably one of the I feel like I'm more of a COO than I am a manager because Garth is so involved in every decision that's made on with him.
Right. Well, the sort of mystique of Garth Brooks has been, I'm going to say, very public from documentaries and stories and shows and interviews over the years. And it's like an iceberg, right? The part you see above the water, which is the documentaries and all of that, belies the 3x below the water that you never see. So, one of the questions I think our audience would love to here, and you may or may not know the answer, or you may not be able to share the answer, but how involved is Trisha in all of what Garth does? I mean, the persona out there is that they're a pretty tight team. They do most of what they do together. I'm just wondering how that works.
I mean, first of all, when I first moved to Nashville, I lived on the farm, and I always wanted the same. I'm like, can Garth always be that nice to everybody? Like, because he's in front of people, he's always so nice. And it's like when you live with somebody or you're with somebody like for 8 months right there on the farm and see him so much. That is Garth. Like he idolizes. He calls her the queen, or
Miss Trisha.
Miss Trisha, Miss Yearwood. It's like she idolizes him, and it's an amazing relationship. I've learned so much from them from that standpoint. Trisha is very supportive, but they're both huge stars, so
Right.
they don't get in the way of one another. She's never given her opinions in my. I've never seen it. Maybe it's bedroom talk. I don't know. From what I see, Garth stays in his lane with his his career, and Trisha stays in her lane on her career, it's beautiful how it works because they are so tight and so close.
That is great to hear. I love that. That's such a cool ending to this segment. And dude, we could go on for an entire show just about Garth and the role you've played and you continue to play. Before we go into our sort of regular questions, can you just give us a paragraph on the sort of the future of live music? Not necessarily Garth, but how do you see, because for those of us in this industry, there is a lot going on. The Department of Justice, Live Nation, they settled it, and then the states went back and sued, and now all bets are off. Live Nation is the largest promoter, the largest manager, they own Ticketmaster. I mean, on the surface, that's a really sort of logical thing to break up. But I don't know if that's going to happen. And I've heard it both ways. You and I talked about that at the top of the show. So, what does your crystal ball tell you about what's coming in the live music industry?
I think one of the biggest things that I've seen in the last few years that's been it made a lot more competition for music is if you look before COVID, I think there was only like 6 or 7, 8 stadium tours in a year, and I think this year there'll be like 35 music tours through stadiums.
Unbelievable.
And yeah, and you look at, a lot of festivals are struggling. And I think a lot of it's because the stadiums have become such a big part, because the audio is so good today. The technology has advanced so far that you could bring these massive screens in, and you can bring these amazing sound systems in and really put on a phenomenal performance that wasn't as easy back 10 years ago. And I think that when you bring in 30 stadium shows in a year into a city, the amount of money that you're sucking up, and then you still have your amphitheaters, and you still have your theaters, and you still have your arenas. It's just a lot of competition today. And I think, I've been reading and seeing some of these tours going on sale, and I saw some numbers on Post Malone and Jelly Roll, and they're struggling a little bit. And you just wonder, it's just a concern that I look at. But I think that
Oversupply? Would you call that oversupply?
I don't know. It's too early to tell. I think the great acts are always going to sell. I'm not sure it's oversupply or are they overpricing these tickets. To me, it might be more about that they're just overpricing, and fans are finally going to say, you know what? There's too much great entertainment out there. I can find a better deal. So I think that's going to be something interesting. I think the whole thing with Ticketmaster and Live Nation. My issue with Live Nation or Ticketmaster, I believe, is like why are they having these 10, 15, 20% service charges when it's a damn app? A service charge should be 2%. If someone goes and buys a ticket for $1,000 and they're paying $200 for a service fee, and you buy 4 tickets, it's ridiculous. I just bought 8 tickets for the ACMs. A buddy and I did, and it was $16,000 table, $1,800 in service fees. To me, that's just ridiculous. And it's not. They're not. No one's doing anything. It should be a a 2%. And what's happened is Live Nation has gone in and cut these big and given these arenas and given out these big paychecks at the front, and it's hurting the fan, and it's so that to me is why does there need to be anything over a 2% service charge? Because this is an app. They're not doing anything to really warrant that kind of money on a high end ticket.
Well, that's been the case for 30 years.
I don't think so.
It'll all come out in some version of the wash in the wake of the settlement ultimately between Live Nation and the DOJ. We'll all watch that unfold in real time. You know, it's a brave new world, whether it's music, whether it's sports. You overlay that the media landscape now with streaming. You look at Apple, with Formula One and Major League Soccer. Amazon has the Thursday night NFL game. I mean, the media rights side of it, back to our early conversation, is really quite interesting. And I don't, I know, for example, Coachella, parts of it, if not all of it, were streamed globally, and the numbers they did were extraordinary.
Yeah. It's really fun to see like some of these, like Carol G. Like she's exploded. Justin Bieber. These, they were able to take Coachella as a platform and use the influencers and the social media to just magnify their careers. I think you're going to see massive careers done off of Coachella and Stagecoach.
No doubt.
And I think it's genius, especially when the management and the artists are able to really create strategies around how they're going to use Coachella as a huge launching pad
Yeah, great
to
platform.
revitalize a career.
I love that. I completely agree. Listen, Randy, we've got a few minutes left. I ask everybody the same few questions. Here we go. Work-life balance. You've been all over the place for a really long time, and now you've settled in Nashville, which is awesome. Can you let us know what, if any, faith plays a role in your work-life balance?
100% faith plays a role. Every morning I listen to the Bible or read the Bible, and that's the most important part of my day. It's where I have my Bible time when I before right even before I get up, and then I have my workout time, and that's where I really want me to really just make sure that I'm doing what is best for Randy Bernard, and it's where I can collect my thoughts and about my family and about my what I want to do, and then the rest of the day is everyone else's. But my first 2 or 3 hours every day is Randy Bernard time, and that's very, very important to me.
So I do a similar thing. It's maybe the first hour of the day, get up early by myself, just me and the other chair, who's in the other
Yeah.
chair.
Yep. Yeah.
It's a great time. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Second question is, this is going to be an easy one for you, because you've been in the business now for the better part of 20 years. The best live concert you ever attended where a female artist or female-led band was the headliner?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I've seen so many great females. Oh God, everything from, I mean, you got to go to Tina Turner. There's people like Jewel that puts on great shows. There's people like Trisha Yearwood. Um, I mean, but I think it has to be a Tina Turner show. It was probably the greatest show I've ever seen. A female. I mean, she demanded attention and she kept it. It was unbelievable.
And I had the pleasure of seeing her one time at the Hollywood Bowl. She rocked the house nonstop, end to end. People never sat down, and it was just a hit parade. One hit after the next. She was, the energy, the dancing, the bravado. She was very cool. I love that pick.
Yeah.
That's a great one. Last one. This is the sort of the pithy one. This is your favorite word. Maybe a touchstone or a North Star, you might call it. What's your favorite word and why?
Mm, mm. Um, I'm a big believer in the word try. You just gotta try. And I mean, I have made 10,000 mistakes, and the only thing that's made me better from them was I never quit trying. And I tell my kids that all the time is you just can't quit. You just got to keep trying, and the right thing will come. I mean, I don't know if that's the right thing, what you're looking for, but
No,
that to me is very important.
it is the right thing because it's your word and what it means to you. And we did a lot more than try on this episode. This was so great, Randy. I can't thank you enough for spending the time with me today. This is very cool.
Well, it's always fun to spend some time with you, and thanks for having me.
You bet.